The security deposit, one of the things that I've noticed is that persons have, again, and this is why we put the mechanism in place, is that persons wanted to live out their security deposit. You know, they would have the security
Uh,
deposit and then want to live it out in the last month.
yeah, well, you see that from a legal perspective, or at least my experience, right, in leases and going to court for leases and stuff like that, is that the security deposit, it is extremely unwise for a landlord to allow it, because you don't know if when you go in there you're gonna find something that has been damaged from that tenant, and you're gonna need that security deposit
Yeah.
to be repaired. So definitely that is inadvisable. To allow the person to live without, right? But it is one thing I always wonder about is, do security deposits get returned? It doesn't. I don't know if in practice some unscrupulous landlords decide that they're gonna hold on to it, and then the person, just like with real estate agents having to fight for their fee, do the tenants have to fight to get that security deposit?
I'm gonna knock wood when I say this. I haven't had the situation where a security deposit wasn't returned to the tenant, because we also, not only do we stipulate that it has to be returned in the contract, but we stipulate the number of days that
Mhm.
the security deposit has to be returned, provided that there are no damages to the property, there are no use for that security deposit. I mean, I these are probably situations you can find yourself in when there's no representative for a tenant, or they went ahead and
Mhm.
because there, believe it or not, there are so many persons who are renting a property without having a lease or an agreement. And these are usually the lower tier rentals for like 30, 50,000, People just move in, they pay their rent, and they live their lives. So if something happens, you can't reinforce any of the landlord's responsibility to have running water, working plumbing, or anything, a roof that doesn't leak. They don't have any sort of mechanism to protect them. So they have to deal with it however it may come.
Yeah. Well, that is a problem you see quite a lot. And generally, people decide that they're better off doing this on their own because they look at it as the extra cost.
Yes.
So they just want to get as much profit out of the situation. And generally, business again is like that.
Yeah.
If you look at how products are priced here, right? And that's why a lot of people choose to buy stuff away and bring it in. Right. I remember years ago I was looking for like a drill and impact screwdriver. I went to look around, and they were selling for here's about 5 times the price. I think generally our business culture is to try and get as much out of the situation with giving as little back as possible. And that profit is never passed on to anybody but the owner. The employees don't benefit from it. So the landlords feel that I gotta get as much out of this situation. Like, I don't really want to have to pay anybody, especially for people who I don't necessarily see the value, right, in going to a lawyer every time, or having a real estate agent involved, not understanding that what we offer to the deal, right, where they could just go find something online and use it. A lot of people use ChatGPT or Google. The problem is they realize when they get to court
Yeah.
that there are a lot of things that are not provided for and they can't rely on.
Right.
That's where they get the rude awakening.
Interestingly, I had this land that was, well, I can't see now where, but very, very high demand area in Georgetown. This land was just purchased and about to repurchase, and that's where I entered the transaction. So my client, who was the buyer, he connected us with his lawyer, and we had the current seller come to us, and we're like, bring the agreement to sale, let's see what's there, because it had to be transferred. We're in the interim of it being transferred from the initial owner to now the new buyer. So the previous buyer was just a middleman essentially, and just resell it, which again, I had no issues. People buy and sell all the time, but the problem is that the intermediate seller, he went and he got a chat GPT contract, and what that chat
Mhm.
GPT contract lacked is an
Mhm.
assignment clause to say that you can assign the land.
Yeah.
And there were so many things missing that the lawyer for my client, who was a buyer, she was just so frustrated, and she lectured them, because you could have seen, like, there wasn't even on top of the contract, there's usually the county of Demerara. It was just missing. You could have seen it's chat GPT. And then sometimes I see lease agreements that The tenant wants it to be as simple as possible, but then you miss key things like your, again, back to security deposit. What happens if this deal? What happens if you want to terminate this contract? You know, now in my contracts, I make sure to include what are some unreasonable causes. You seeing a nicer house 2 months into the deal does not or should not amount to you ending this lease agreement when you've signed for a year. And again, there are a lot of mechanisms that myself and my team try to add because we've encountered persons who don't adhere to the full term of a contract. So
I've done some real estate transactions. I was working with a company from Spain about for a year and a half, and I did work with them in the oil and gas sector here. I also did in Ghana, Namibia, Equatorial Guinea, and I looked at some leases from Africa, right, where they have oil and gas operators, and one of the things that they do usually in a country like Equatorial Guinea, they'll have the lease in both English. All corporate documents are both in English and Spanish because they're a Spanish speaking country. Also, you'll have things like move in and move out condition reports. You'll have deposit to hold agreements. You'll have they really ensure that all the parties, all the adults who are going to be residing here. So they'll have application forms, first of all. You don't just call and say, I'm looking to rent this house and the lease is drafted. They have an application form. They want to make sure that your income is 2 to 3 times the rental price. They'll also want to make sure you say who is going to be living there so they know who has to go on lease. Because I could just imagine this happening here where you sign with one person, that person moves out and they leave somebody who is not on the lease
yeah,
in there, right? It'll be difficult to get that person out. That person is a squatter, right? And you have to use different process to get that person out. You can't just go to magistrate's court and do a plaint or possession like you would with somebody who has a lease. So how prevalent are these things that we see in other countries that are, let's say, more advanced in terms of having more? It's about the standard that the people who lease want to see. So expats, people who work in the oil and gas industry, they want to have the kind of a systemic way as opposed to the laissez-faire way that we do things here. So how prevalent is that? Are we seeing more of these agreements?
for the transactions that I've dealt with, there was one landlord who implemented a clause to say if you leave before the year, you need to pay my rent for that year because you're signing for that year. And usually, and this we had it back and forth between the company's legal secretary and the owner. And she's saying, well, I'm going to give you notice. Notice should suffice if we want to leave. And we got to the point where the owner he was like, he's very unwilling to go ahead with this unless you pay a certain amount of months before the lease ends, if you're going to end it before the term. Guyanese are definitely getting smarter, especially with, and again, as an agent, these are things that you have to make sure are in place. If you end the lease before the term, what are you going to do? Are you going to forfeit the security deposit? Which is something that we've started to do. But then if you forfeit your security deposit, you end the contract. What happens if you damage the property?
Yeah.
And then with regards to verifying the clients and their position, their financial position, for companies, it's easier because landlords will just ask for the articles of cooperation and then have a company representative sign that agreement. That is sort of an ironclad for them. Do they do a interview process with the company? No. I haven't gone through a transaction where that's happened. I know for companies like Schlumberger, they do add you as a vendor where a lot more documentation has to be submitted. But an application form, I haven't seen it. But I think in US, they do things like credit scores. Here, once the company is signing for you, you're good. We don't need to see your source of income. However, when you go to the middle income and lower tier rentals, we want to see a job letter. We want to see how much you're making. And like the banks, we want to make sure that your rent is at least 1/3 of your income because you have the other 2/3 to deal with life and those expenses.
You mentioned sometime at the beginning about screening. Do landlords, do real estate agents engage in screening in terms of asking for certificate of fitness or what they call a police clearance, credit score? You mentioned the job letter, that is a form of screening, but how in depth do you get? I could see the application form being useful for middle and low income,
Yes.
especially.
Yep. So when it comes to middle income rentals, and this is where we're looking at like a 75 to 190 rental, we do ask for the job letter. And then we, of course, well, from the real estate agent standpoint and my team, we do call to make sure that you are indeed working there and this is indeed your salary, because we know people crook the books. And what we've also done is that we don't call the number on the letter, we google the company and then we call a number that they have on their website, because people will put their friend's number, you call and say, hey, is John making this among them? Yes, is the best worker. So we just go a step ahead of them and call. Credit score, Guyanese don't ask for credit score, but there is credit info that you can always get information. But it's just the job letter. And for commercial properties, then they would ask for a letter of good standing from the bank, because businesses are often a little hesitant to share their income statements or their bank statements. So we just ask for a letter of good standing from the bank when it comes to commercial properties,
Okay.
which usually suffice.
So why? So for people interested in real estate, could you share a bit about the operational parts of your job, the parts that people might not necessarily think real
It's
estate agents
stressful.
do?
Don't do it. It's very stressful. It's high risk, high reward. And that's really it, because you have to, and I think it applies to every business, and real estate is a business because you manage your customers, you manage your product, and there are points where you'll have a lot of money riding on a single contract. For example, I don't know, it was a night they had a party, this EDM party thing. Was it Friday, Saturday, something? I had a
Yeah.
contract for 7,000, actually 8,300 USD. Was supposed to be signed 7:30 that night, Saturday night. Everybody agreed. The night before, I went to a team social and we were hanging, and I was on the phone trying to get everybody to come in agreement. So, and it's like, it's like, okay, cool. You can make tomorrow, you can make an easy 1.4 million. And some people don't make that amount of money in a year. So when you look at it as, okay, cool, I can deal with the stress for 1.4. So, everything seems fine. And at 7:38, I get a call and the client's like, I'm sorry, we won't be going forward with just
After
like that.
getting to the point of completion.
Right. Waiting on the contract. You're just waiting on the contract to sign. And that's just it. I can't, there's nothing that you can do because a contract hasn't been signed while they've accepted the preliminary negotiations. A contract has to be signed to make it binding. And just like that, you have your imaginary 1.4 gone. Poof. And things like that might, it might stress out. You might have plans with a 1.4. And
Yeah,
that's just the risk of the
people,
game.
as soon as they heard the fee, sometimes people, as soon as they hear the commission or the fee, they don't decide how they can spend it. And if the thing don't go through, they are inconsolably enraged.
Yeah. And I think if you want to get into, again, high risk, high reward. The risk is that this deal can fall through in a matter of hours and you could potentially lose a lot of money. Money that you never had, but money that you intended to have. But the opportunities in this industry is immense. Like you can go from, I have friends who went from making 100,000 a normal job to now making 3 point something a month. Their lives has drastically changed. Their family lives have drastically changed. But you also go months where you don't close a deal, where you don't make money, and you have to rely on that 1.4 maybe that you've made. But every day you have to. It's like this. It's a rabbit race. No, a rabbit's fast. It's a quick game. Like I lost two really great listings. A listing in Prashad Nagar. When I tell you the price was 60 million for property in Prashad Nagar, when have you heard that? I lost that listing because I didn't reply in 3 minutes.